Привет. That is hello in Russian. How about that? Okay, comrades, let us proceed with Chapter 1A. So, I already mentioned some of the requirements for life. This section is on survival needs, and also then is going to segue right into the major theme of this topic is homeostasis and negative feedback. Negative feedback is the name of the process by which we maintain this balance known as homeostasis. So I don't think that this is going to be a big surprise to you. We need several factors for survival that must be, now check out what this says, must be in the appropriate amounts. Too much or too little can be harmful. Does that sound familiar? That's my Goldilocks for you. Too much is bad, too little is bad, just right is good. And so we'll go over each one of these. Nutrients, oxygen, water, normal body temperature, and related to oxygen, appropriate atmospheric pressure. So nutrients, these are the, what does it say here? Chemicals for energy and cell building. These are the raw materials and energy that we use to build, repair, maintain the body. So imagine that you want to build a shed. And you go down to Lowe's or Home Depot and you buy a bunch of lumber and nails and you take them home and you don't have a shed. You just got a pile of stuff. I actually have a pile of stuff out for a project next to my driveway here. And so what do you need to do to turn that into a shed? Well, you have to put the parts together in just the right way so that you end up with a finished product that's functional. And not only that, but guess what that takes? Energy and work. It takes energy to do work. I'd say that's why I still got that pile of stuff over there, but I just brought it home yesterday, so and that's not going to be fun. That's involving a project and a septic tank I got to dig up. So consider yourselves lucky to be on a sewer system in all likelihood. So anyway, just like my project, where you have a bunch of parts, you have a bunch of raw materials, those are like the nutrients that we use as raw materials to build like amino acids, proteins that we can break down into amino acids to be able to reconstruct them as human proteins how we need. And I did not get to go to the gym, so I don't have that. I told you in that last section, yeah, maybe I would do that, but it didn't make it today because I'm having troubles with mastering A&P. So I know you're thinking, welcome to my world, right? So some of these nutrients we use as the raw materials, and others yet we use for energy to put these raw materials together. In either maybe we're going to grow new tissue, maybe we're going to replace worn out parts, like red blood cells only have about a 4-month lifespan, so we need to and that's my favorite replace worn out parts example. Or maybe we have an injury or something's damaged and we have to repair it. It takes both energy and raw materials to do so. And here are some familiar top molecules types. Carbohydrates, that's the body's preferred method of our use for energy. Carbs get a bad rap, and we can easily eat too many of the wrong carbs. But the body prefers carbohydrates as that energy source. Proteins are the main building block, raw material, but we can also use those for energy if we need to. And fat is like the retirement account of energy. That's where energy goes to be stored for the long term. And we need those in a balanced amounts, and I'll have more to say about each one of those three when we get to the macromolecule section in chemistry. And I'll talk about good carbs, bad carbs, good sources of protein, not as good sources of protein, and protein, good sources of protein, and good fats. Yes, there are good fats, are related. Then we need minerals and vitamins. Also, they play roles in chemical reactions. They play minor but important and necessary roles. A mineral is an inorganic molecule, whereas vitamins are organic molecules. Organic molecules are those that contain carbon. And so vitamins, you think of vitamin C, D, E, the different B vitamins. Those are all organic carbon-containing molecules, whereas minerals are things that you see also on the back of the vitamin bottle, things like magnesium, manganese, iron, zinc, copper, things that we need in fairly small amounts, but they're still necessary. Oxygen, essential for the release of energy from food. The process by which we get the most energy from food is called cell respiration, which uses oxygen in the process. It's also called aerobic respiration. And without oxygen, we just can't get enough energy to survive. So some organisms are able to survive in an anaerobic environment, but they are confined to being very small organisms like bacteria or very low metabolism creatures. Pretty rare, the organism that doesn't need oxygen on our planet. We sure do. So if we have one sugar molecule, say a glucose molecule, the typical sugar we talk about, we can only get, without oxygen, we can only get 2 units of energy. The unit of energy is something called ATP, which we'll get into later. But if we have oxygen, we can get 17 times or 18 times more ATP out of it. It's a lot more efficient. That's like having 2 cars, where one car gets 2 miles to the gallon and the other car gets 35 miles to the gallon. Which one are you going to drive on a regular basis? All right, well, for me, I'm going to probably take the more fuel efficient. That's the one I'm going to pick. So, and we actually have that here at my house. Both my wife and I drive Toyota Corolla. We usually get about 38 miles to the gallon on the highway, maybe 40. But I also have, since I live out in the country, I have a 1997 Ford F-150. And it gets about 10 miles to the gallon. It's kind of old. It's probably older than some of you. But it has its uses. Like when I have to bring that pile of lumber, you see how I work that in back from town? I brought a piece of plywood and 2 big pieces of lumber, and there's no way to fit a piece of plywood in a Toyota Corolla. So living out in the country like we do, I need, it has its use. I just don't drive it very much because 1, it's old, it'll die on me, and for 2, it gets terrible gas mileage. So we are like the more fuel efficient cars, where we aerobic life forms that can use oxygen, which is most of us on the planet. And let's see, the body can survive only a few minutes without oxygen. That brain of ours is very intolerant to lack of oxygen, and I'm pretty sure you knew that already. Water, the substance of life, the most abundant chemical in the body. We are each somewhere around 2/3, somewhere, give or take, depending on the situation, depending on our age. Old people like me dry up and wither away, lower water content, but we're somewhere around 2/3 water by mass. So the water provides the watery environment. How about that? Needed for chemical reactions. So the chemical reactions that take place, the physiology that takes place inside the cells, I was talking about earlier, that takes place in a water-based solution. We're going to come to know and love a solution that has water as the solvent, which is the most common on Earth. That kind of solution is called an aqueous solution, aqua, water. Aqueous solution is one where water is the solvent. And so that means that the stuff is dissolved in water. and so water is necessary for life as we know it. And as a matter of fact, that's the lens through which we view the search for extraterrestrial life in our solar system, the places where there is or may have been liquid water, or where we're going to look. Later on this summer, if everything goes okay, they're going to send a new uh, rover to Mars, and this rover is going to look for signs of ancient life in a crater on Mars that looks like at one point it was filled with water, liquid water. Water is a very common substance in our universe, but most of the places that you find water, it's solid. Ice, we call it here. So there are other places in our solar system that are very intriguing places to look for the potential of extraterrestrial. I'm not talking about little green men. I'm talking about more likely about bacterial type of things, creatures. Besides Mars, there perhaps there's a moon of Saturn called Enceladus that has geysers of water spewing into space. That indicates that there's liquid water under the surface there. The Galileo probe detected that. And there are several moons of Jupiter. The most intriguing one is called Europa, that actually may have more water than Earth, and some of it might be liquid. So everywhere on Earth, that's a pretty broad statement. Everywhere on Earth that we find liquid water, we find life. Life is very tenacious. All righty, so we must have the right amount of water. Too much is bad. Too little is bad. So one of the systems that's involved in maintaining water balance is that urinary system. Normal body temperature. If body temperature falls below or goes above 37 degrees Celsius, the rates of chemical reactions are affected, and other things are affected too. So for those of us that were born and raised in the United States, what temperature in Fahrenheit do you think is 37 degrees Celsius? 37 degrees Celsius is what in Fahrenheit? You got it, about 98.6. So we'll have more on the metric system and measurements a bit later. Medicine and science use the metric system, so we're going to have to deal with that. And the appropriate atmospheric pressure. The higher you go up in the atmosphere, the lower the pressure is, the less oxygen is available. Humans do pretty well up to about 10 or 11,000 feet if you're not that active. You get up to about 15,000 feet, you're going to start having some problems. So that's not usually a problem for most people. Which, as I mentioned earlier, I say that a lot, don't I? Homeostasis, the overriding theme of anatomy and physiology, and indeed medicine itself. The maintenance of relatively stable internal conditions despite continuous changes in the environment. And that can be for the whole entire person, or even a cell, or a part of a system like the blood chemistry. Homeostasis is a dynamic state of equilibrium, always readjusting as needed. So what does that word dynamic mean? Dynamic. Dynamic, what does that mean? It means constantly changing. Constantly changing. So the conditions are constantly changing, but yet we try to maintain that equilibrium, that balance. And if you saw me in class, you would see me balancing my hands back and forth like a seesaw, because that's what it's like. Things go up, things come back down. That body temperature, that's going to be our first example. All systems are contributing to the maintenance of homeostasis. As I said, it is the most important thing. So the nervous and the endocrine systems are both involved in homeostatic controls, short term and long term. Short term would be nervous, longer term would be endocrine. And the things, are variables that are the factors that are under homeostatic control. So when we look at that list, we see I've mentioned some of these already: blood sugar, body temperature, blood volume, blood calcium. The list goes on and on and on. And in order to maintain homeostatic control, it involves three components. Now think about the thermostat in your home and the temperature control of your living environment. It involves three components. It involves a receptor, a control center, and an effector. I'm going to go over each one of those. But the receptor detects what's going on. The receptor is like the thermometer inside the thermostat. It tells the rest of the thermostat what the temperature is in your home. And then it sends that information to the control center, which in the thermostat is what temperature did you set your thermostat to? I think I got mine at 75 today. It'll probably go up because, we are in the middle. If you're listening to this in the fall, we're in the summertime and it's the middle of a heat apocalypse. And the heat apocalypse is not going to finish until end of October anyway. So it's going to be 105 degrees later this week. And so the receptor detects the temperature, sends that information to compare. The control center compares it to the set point, what the thermostat is set for. And then the time comes, sends out a message to the effector, which controls the variable. In the case of the thermostat, when the temperature gets above the set point, it turns on the air conditioner. Mine is on right now. And I can not only can I feel the cool air coming out of the vent, but I can feel my electric bill going up. And you know what? I don't care, because I'd rather be comfortable, and I'll care when the electric bill comes, that's for sure. So a good example of homeostatic control, a very simple one that I think is easy to understand, is the temperature control of our living environment. So let's go back through that. I didn't want to complicate things. I wanted to talk about that without you trying to read this stuff. So the receptor monitors the environment, the temperature in the home, and responds to stimuli, plural, things that cause changes. And in this case, the thermostat responds to just one stimulus. It's temperature. And that's where the thermostat is, not everywhere else. And the body has the same issue. The body can detect stimuli sometimes only just in one place. And the control center, now in the thermostat example, we get to decide the set point. But the control center, for instance, the control center for body temperature is in the hypothalamus mainly, which is part of the brain. And then, so that control center most of these control centers are in the central nervous system, that compares the current value for the variable to its set point, what it's supposed to be. So for body temperature, what's 37 degrees Celsius. And then determines the appropriate response and sends a message out to the effector, which then now let's slow down and tap the brakes here. Either reduces the stimulus, negative feedback, right? Don't just stop reading there. Don't even look at the rest of this. Negative feedback. I'm going to talk about that right now. Negative feedback is the most, by far, important mechanism by which we maintain homeostasis. So negative feedback implies that there's positive feedback, and that is very rare and a completely different thing. Completely different thing. We are only going to run into positive feedback once in a while. Negative feedback is going to be constant. So negative feedback, that means that the effector causes the variable to go in the opposite direction. Like when the temperature by my thermostat went above its set point, it turned on the air conditioner, and the air conditioner blew that cold air I told you I could feel. And that sends the room temperature in the other direction, or opposite direction. And in this case, that's what negative feedback means, opposite influence. So something goes up and gets too high, the effector sends it back down in the other direction. And that is how we maintain homeostasis. Two examples here. Body temperature is nervous system, regulates it, and blood glucose, which is commonly referred to as blood sugar levels, is regulated by the endocrine system. And it says insulin. You probably heard of insulin. There's another hormone involved too that you might not have heard of called glucagon. So the insulin and the glucagon work together to maintain proper blood glucose levels. Both of those hormones are secreted by the pancreas. So in the instance where we have an increase in blood glucose, like after a meal, blood sugar goes up, the pancreas detects that. It detects that and secretes insulin into the blood. Insulin magically causes blood sugar levels to go down. No, it's not magic. not at all. Insulin helps open a doorway, a passageway in the cell membrane, plasma membrane, to let the sugar into the blood. And so the body cells can absorb the glucose more efficiently. Glucose can't get across the plasma membrane by itself. And then at the opposite, when blood glucose decreases, like at night when we're sleeping, then the pancreas detects that. The control center detects that and then secretes glucagon as a result. And glucagon causes the liver to release more glucose into the blood to bring glucose levels back up. And here's a it's been a while since we've done that. Okay. Now what just happened at my house is the air conditioner went off. So what happened is the receptor noticed that the temperature came back toward the set point, sent that information to the control center in the thermostat that compared it to the temperature that I set it to, and said, "Oh, okay, we're back," and turned off the air conditioner. And now I don't feel like I'm going broke. The same thing happens, as I mentioned, with our body. Here's an interesting graph. I don't think I'll go over this graph right now. It's a good one. You can look at it. It's in your textbook, which you should be getting soon. Here, this guy, he looks cold. Been a while since we've been cold, huh? Don't worry, it'll come around again if we live that long. All right, now positive feedback. Positive feedback shows up here. So notice I went back to this slide. I'm going back to this slide. Negative feedback. Many, many things, factors inside the body are under negative feedback. Control, homeostatic control, maintaining homeostasis, and negative feedback are key. I can't overemphasize that enough. I wish that they would even not talk about positive feedback at this point in the chapter, because this is a smaller deal. Now, negative feedback is balance, homeostasis. Positive feedback is a means to an end. That means it amplifies a series of events until we get where we want to, and then it turns off. So here is a couple of examples. Enhancement of labor contractions by oxytocin. So when a woman is getting ready to give birth, sorry guys can't give birth. The pituitary gland releases a hormone called oxytocin, which enhances labor contractions. It makes them stronger. Those contractions of the uterus in turn send feedback back to the brain, and the brain releases more oxytocin. And this goes round and round and round in a so-called snowball effect. It's hard to talk about snowballs in Texas in July. And then eventually the baby gets born. And then the stress on the uterus is gone. And then everything goes back to as normal as it's ever going to be again. If you've had children, you know nothing ever is normal again. But that's good, because children are a gift. So positive feedback, a means to an end. Enhancement of labor contractions, blood clotting, milk formation, and a very few others. Negative feedback is indeed the biggest one. Homeostatic imbalance occurs. and then that's not a good thing at all. That leads to disease, it leads to suffering. Maintaining homeostatic balance is more difficult in our old age. And if the negative feedback mechanisms become overwhelmed, well, bad things happen. And look at that. Wifey just walked in the door. So with that thought, I will say goodbye in Russian. До свидания.